Hey guys, CJ here and welcome to part 3 of my 3-part vlog series on Batman v Superman and some of the controversy surrounding it, especially with Captain America Civil War on the horizon. Of course, part 1 was my honest review of Batman v Superman because I don't feel like I had really articulated my thoughts anywhere other than maybe the spoiler cast, and I felt like you guys needed to know that going into this series. Part 2 was, of course, me talking about why it's okay to compare Captain America Civil War and Batman v Superman because it's just natural, and honestly, if you want to check either of those out, there are annotations in the corners of your screen. But if you're only going to watch one video in this series, I hope it's this one, because this one is honestly the most important. And why is that? Well, that's because today we're going to talk about the idea of an anti-DC conspiracy. Now, before we dive in and I give my thoughts on that alleged conspiracy, we've got to understand what it is. And it's essentially just a repurposing of the old argument that there is a smear campaign against DC and that Marvel is behind it. But this takes it a step further. Essentially, after the bad reviews for Batman v Superman came out on Rotten Tomatoes, a lot of people took to Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, etc., to claim that Marvel and Disney were paying off critics to write bad reviews about Batman v Superman. Now let's just dive in and start dissecting that right away, but let me tell you straight up, this accusation actually kind of infuriates me, and I'll tell you why. Some of you may know, but some of you may not know, I'm a recent college graduate, and I graduated with a degree in journalism. And journalists, as you may or may not know, are supposed to be bound by a code of ethics. And reviewing, like it or not, is a form of journalism. Granted, it's a form of journalism that has a little bit of an entertaining flair and doesn't quite have the objectivity because reviews are inherently subjective. But you still are trying to be as objective as possible, and honestly, I think most of these reviewers were trying to be as objective as possible. I think the best way to dissect this argument of a conspiracy is just to take it head on, and so here it is. Honestly, there is no conspiracy. Because think about what you're alleging. Essentially, what you're saying is that Marvel and Disney paid off hundreds and hundreds of critics to give bad reviews. They paid off trained writers and, yes, journalists. These journalists who are supposed to have an ethical code. One, if you overlook the sheer amount of money that would have taken and the fact that I don't think Disney would have been willing to spend that much, you've got to confront the fact that somebody, at least one person, probably would have stuck by their ethical guns and not taken the money. And if Disney had approached someone to try and buy them off and they had refused, wouldn't they have gone public with that? That's a huge story. Especially if they worked for a trade or a major newspaper, that would be massive. So really, I don't think there's a conspiracy. To sum it up simply, one, it would have cost way too much money, and I don't think Disney would have bought off the hundreds of critics that wrote negative reviews about Batman v Superman. Two, I think you've got to understand the fact that most of these are ethical journalists who probably wouldn't have betrayed their own moral codes just for a little bit more money. Certainly not all of them would have. And if there was just one, then they would have blown the whistle on the entire thing. But there is a difference between conspiracy and bias. And I'll say, do I think all of these critics really prefer Marvel movies that much over DC? No, because I think, frankly, most of them probably don't have an opinion. I think gun to their head, once again, it's like Coke and Pepsi. There may be a small segment of the population that really cares, but other than that, it's kind of like, it's okay. But there may be some latent bias that people don't know about. As one commenter pointed out on my first video, and several pointed out on my second video, there are a lot of people that don't understand that this is DC's second movie in setting up a cinematic universe. And maybe DC expected themselves to compete right away, but should reviewers have expected them to compete right away as well? Honestly, I don't know, and I'll leave that to you guys to decide. Granted, I think most reviewers were very objective in their dissection of the film, and certainly as a film, from a cinema standpoint, it has a lot of issues. Unfortunately, it wasn't Kino. But expectations certainly might have played a role in that. So to wrap things up in a nice little bow, no, I don't think there is a vast conspiracy against DC films, but let me know in the comments section down below, do you actually think there's a vast conspiracy and that Disney paid off critics to shit on Batman v Superman, or no? Let me know down below, and of course, signing off, this is CJ, and I'll see you tomorrow.